Today, at the midway point of the 2024 fantasy season, we redraft these 2024 rookies. We talk price points for them as well that we're willing to pay in 2025 draft capital, as well as our rationale behind who is rising and who is falling for us. Stick around for all that and more. And welcome into the Down Construction Podcast. Justin joined here with David and JP. I don't know about you guys. I'm a little excited for this episode. This is a fun class.
Yeah, it's a little bit more fun than I expected. This class is definitely living up to the hype.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We have 8 guys at least that look like amazing dynasty assets. So yeah, if you had picks this year, you're probably pretty happy.
I sure am. Before we hop in, just want to give a quick little plug. Would love if you hit that subscribe button. We've got a video coming out next week on the 2025 rookie class. Would love your support. That being said, we're going to hop right into our draft. Don't want to waste any of your time. And we have David with the 101. And who are you taking here? Break my heart. Take my guy.
I don't know how you could pick anyone but Jaden Daniels. He is, believe it or not, the top overall player on Cube Trade Cut as of today. Not top rookie, top player. I don't, if you don't believe in Cube Trade Cut as, law or anything, I understand. I don't always follow it, but it is crowdsourced amongst a bunch of dynasty players. Him sitting at the top definitely means something about his value. I looked, they suggest you need to add an early 25 first to Caleb Williams to get Jaden Daniels. I think that's a little rich for my blood, but just a comment on where he's at value-wise. 5th most total fantasy points, 9th most points per game, on pace for 347 points on the season. That would be the 2nd best rookie QB season since 2000 behind only Cam Newton. Dual threat guy. He's doing everything we thought he could and more. Probably don't need to say much more. I think this was a pretty obvious pick.
I wanted the 101 so I could take him.
Jaden Daniels, he started the season on fire. Kind of thought like, okay, hit an easy schedule. Let's just see a little bit more. And, we've seen a half of the season so far, and he's continue to be excellent. So yeah, I definitely would have taken him. I think we all certainly would have at 101, but I had the 102 and I took wide receiver Malik Neighbors. And this was a really, really tough decision for me, actually, between Neighbors and I'll just kind of spoil it here, Caleb Williams. They both shown some really good things, but I got to take Neighbors just because when it's a close decision like this, I'm going to take the asset that I think it's more liquid, that probably has a little bit more value in the market in season, because I have so many leagues where it's just really, really hard for me to move a quarterback. I have 3 or 4, and when it's a wide receiver, it seems like it's just a lot easier to move those guys. And I mean, he's just a superstar, and he's already a top 3 dynasty wide receiver. He's not quite been as good as he was at the start of the season, but I mean, we still have seen plenty, and based on what he is as a prospect and what he can do just as a contested catch guy and after the catch, yeah, this is a guy that I'd be jumping over the moon if I had him on my team.
Cannot blame you there. Would have been an easy choice for me to take him at the 103 had you let him fall. The other guy that you let fall to the 103, also an easy pick. I'm going to take who you mentioned, Caleb Williams here. Pretty much the consensus 101 before the season. Some people were taking, don't want to spoil the next pick, some people were taking Marv. We might end up spoiling a lot of these picks, but you guys probably know who they're going to be honest anyways. Given the fact that I'm getting a guy that right now I think is still about a round 1 startup draft pick, if not early 2nd, just depends on who you're drafting with. And I'm getting him at the 103 here, just as a testament to how good this draft class has been. He has flashed some obvious upside in that Chicago offense. He's also struggled a little bit, as you expect a rookie to, but I have very little doubts that he is their quarterback of the future. He's shown just enough fantasy upside that I think he can be a pretty consistent low-end QB1 once he kind of comes fully into his own, with the potential to go a little bit higher based off of some of his mobility. So I think it's a slam dunk, no-brainer. And wow, getting him at 103, who would have saw that a few months ago?
Hate to say it as a Packers fan, but I do think the Bears finally have their guy. He started a little slow, I guess, but he's definitely showing what we thought he would show. He looks like a stud out there. He's growing each and every week, it seems like. That's 3 picks in a row that I think in most years you'd be happy to have at 101. I do think this is where it gets a little interesting. I think there's at least 3, maybe 4 guys you could consider here. Justin already buried the lead for me, but I am going to go with my pre-draft analysis of him. I'm sticking with Marv here. He hasn't lived up to the hype, I guess, but it was unbelievably high hype we put on this guy. Several things you could say to illustrate how bad he's been. 4 weeks at wide receiver 57 or worse, all under 6 points. That's not very good. I mean, Lad McConkey, who's, we liked, but he has more points per game than him on the season. But, it's not quite as bad as it seems either. He's on pace for 290 turned 17 points roughly if you ignore the Packers game he left early with that concussion. It's not a great season, and we wanted it to be. I still think he's a stud. I still think he's going to be a long-term asset for this team. I think he's going to be an elite wide receiver for several years, so I'm sticking with Marv.
Yeah, and Marvin Harrison Jr., I mean, he's playing the hardest position at wide receiver there, just been stuck out on island at X there. And you've seen there's a little bit of chemistry that's not quite there with him and Kyler. There's some fade balls that you just think that in a couple years' time, maybe in just a year from now, that they're going to connect on a lot more. I think that they're just going to continue to develop together. And at the 105, I mean, I'm left with the scraps between Marv and Brock Bowers is kind of what I was thinking of at this point. And that's a beautiful spot to be in because Brock Bowers, he's far and away the Dynasty tight end 1, and he's tight end 2 in fantasy points as a 21-year-old rookie behind only George Kittle. Brock Bowers, we know he's one of the best tight end prospects we've seen, and he's delivering like much beyond those expectations, honestly, especially for where he landed. Our expectations weren't super high from a production standpoint, but this guy's he's incredible. He's got amazing hands. He's a yak weapon. He runs a ton of routes too, and he just looks like the go-to guy, like very, very clearly. He's just too talented for them not to get in the ball, so I cannot blame them. But the amount of confidence I have in Bowers as the tight end 1 compared to what we had with Sam Laporta last year, that confidence, there's just a massive gap because Laporta, he didn't look like Bowers did as a rookie. It was a lot of the offense being really, really good, getting him open. He had a lot of touchdowns. Laporta's still a great player and everything, but I just have so much more confidence in Bowers than I did Laporta.
No, that's a slam dunk. Recently, because David threw it my way, I listened to the Dynasty Nerd redraft of this class, and they took Bowers even higher than us. They took him above Marv. I believe they took him at was it the 102 or the 103, David? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but I know it was before Marv. It was definitely in the top 4 picks. I think it was the top 3 for sure, even.
And their argument and the thought process behind it of you're getting the tight end 1 in Dynasty, a top 3 producer, which is what you need to be that elite, actual, true difference maker at tight end, is top 3, which he's proving he can do that at this young of an age in a way that it's not like Kyle Pitts rookie year. He looks a little bit more complete. It's not like Sam Laporta rookie year. Like this guy, he looks like the real deal. It's just tell us in the comments below if you think he should be going higher. And I don't necessarily disagree. It's just this is a crazy class. I think potentially that last year all 5 of these guys like right now like would be taken probably right about or above like anyone from last year. Obviously CJ Stroud's up there, but he's kind of fallen a little bit now. So
we should probably mention, since we're talking about the tight end, we are drafting on a 175 tight end premium.
I mean, is Bijan Robinson, are you taking all 5 of these guys ahead of Bijan, you think?
yeah, I hate running back. I could understand rostering Bijan over some of these guys team need dependent. I could understand taking Bijan over Marv potentially, but I don't think I would do it. I can understand. I wouldn't do it. But Marv is the only one just because of Marv's production that like if I had Bijan already and someone was offering me Marv, I might struggle to pivot that way. I might not pivot that way. I might try to aim for a better producing wide receiver that I have around him tier wise. But otherwise, all of these guys over Bijan to me is pretty close to a slam dunk. Obviously, if I have 3 quarterbacks, I might consider tearing off of Caleb Williams to Bijan, but I'd probably need a plus. David, you kind of agree there?
Yeah, definitely from one of the quarterbacks. I think the other positions are league and team dependent to a degree, but in a vacuum, yeah, I think I would probably take all 5 in a 175 tight end premium. I do think I would take them over Bijan right now.
Yeah, I think Marv is the one that I would be kind of on the fence about. I clearly taking Marv in a rebuild, but a contender, I might take Bijan depending what my roster looks like.
I have that same opinion. Just depends on the team on that, but on a rebuild, all 5 of these guys over Bijan to the bank, 100%.
Yeah.
The next guy on our draft, guy I'm taking here, Brian Thomas Jr., a guy that we had a lot of concerns about just seeing only 1 year of production at LSU. It was incredible production. David was quoting statistics about his touchdown production being in a list that included other LSU wide receivers such as Justin Jefferson. We just had the question of how much of an outlier is it? He has this Heisman candidate quarterback throwing to him. He has a teammate in our top 6 right here, Malik Neighbors, who is taking a lot of the pressure off of him. And he is that dog. He is that guy so far this year. He is a top 12 wide receiver in total points so far. He was 7 before this last week where he had a little bit of a drop off playing with an injury. Honestly, he's just shown he has the ability to do it at this level. He's answered all questions and concerns we had about whether or not it would transfer, etc. He's got a young quarterback that, although he's not one of our favorite quarterbacks, they have a connection already. His situation's not bad. Like, compare him to Malik Neighbors' QB situation, although Malik Neighbors seems slightly QB proof. And I feel better about Brian Thomas Jr.'s. Not that I would consider taking him over Neighbors just because Neighbors is that guy. But this guy just seems to have it all going on. I think he's probably worth at least 2 firsts. Obviously, vet the first. They can't both be early. I'm not paying that or anything like that. Probably want 2 mid firsts to mid to late. To have that at the 106 in a draft class is just incredible.
Yeah, this is quite a class. We liked BTJ going in. Like you said, we wondered if the 1 year was just 1 year or if he was going to be able to sustain that. Looks like he's going to sustain that and grow from it. You love to have him. You gained a ton of value if you drafted him at the back of the first round. Like you said, he's probably 2 first rounds of value right now. So moving on, 107, my pick. I think this was actually a pretty easy pick given the board. Taking Drake May, yet another player that quite honestly is probably worth an early first at least, if not 2 firsts. Looking like the young dual threat franchise quarterback we thought he might be. He's 22. He's played 4 games since he took over, and 1 he was knocked out after 30% of the snaps. And since taking over, including that game, he's QB9. If you take that game out, he's averaging 22.7 points per game. That would be good for QB3 on the season. And look, he's doing this with maybe the worst group of skill position players and PFF's lowest rated offensive line. So absolutely no hope for this guy. And he's still showing out. And the good news is for the Patriots, they have the most cap space for 2025 according to Over the Cap. And now they are in the driver's seat for the 101. So maybe better times ahead for Drake May. Definitely would hope for that.
Yeah, and in our QB tier video, we just had a comment earlier today, actually, saying that given his recent production, there's a pretty good case that he should almost be in the back end of the same tier that we have Caleb Williams and about 7 other quarterbacks in. So just kind of challenging that thought process. Would you be willing to take a second to move down from Caleb Williams to Drake May, guys?
Honestly, I would.
If it's potentially early, I'd have to think pretty hard about it. I probably would, but if it's a late second, I would want more.
So that does put him knocking right on that tier 2 door, since we had that second as kind of the value qualifier. Maybe not permanent residency, but like he has like a visitor's pass.
I don't know if you remember, by the way, but when I was asked who had the best chance to rise up to it, I said in the next few weeks it would be Drake May, and here we are.
I mean, I'm considering moving him up because he's on pace for over 800 rushing yards after his first 4 starts, which that's true dual threat kind of a guy. And when you're putting up numbers with that bad of an offense, I mean, shoot, it's super impressive. I was really high on him, and I thought he should have been the 102 in the NFL draft. Was wrong about that because Jaden Daniels is really special, but I think Drake May, dude, he's just, I feel like his rushing ability has been not really considered as much because of what Jaden Daniels was as a prospect, as one of the best rushers we've seen. But Drake May, he's not that far behind. He's really not, and he's really strong. If you see that play where he got that game-tying touchdown, the 12-second play, he was shaking defenders off. And that's what the kind of thing that you get from a guy that's big and strong as well as a guy who can make you miss. So yeah, man, I'm getting pretty bullish on him after this past week, honestly.
I mean, JP, you don't have to say get it. You were already, and it looks like you were right.
I mean, I took him in the early 3rd in a startup, and I think his value's got to be up from there. I mean, I got him in the back of a 3rd in another one, traded him away, and I kind of regret that, even though I got a darn good offer. So I think that says something for sure. But moving on to the 108, this was a pretty easy decision for me. It's Rome Odunze. And I mean, this is another prospect, speaking of guys I'm bullish on, a guy that I really liked. He was a top 10 pick. I thought he was one of the best route runners in the draft based on reception perception data. He had the size, athleticism, and he has started off kind of predictably fairly slow. You'd hope to see just a little bit more, but I mean, he's got a rookie quarterback, and their offensive line is really bad. But he has played through a knee injury for a few weeks as well. I mean, week 8, passing game didn't do a whole lot, but Odunze, he led the Bears in catches and yards. Week 9, this past week as well, did the same thing. Led them in passes and yards and catches and yards. So, I mean, yeah, I think we knew that it wasn't going to be super great, but we're seeing the flashes, and we've seen the flashes from Caleb as well. So if both of these guys continue to develop together, and what we expect is Keenan Allen is likely gone after this year with his age and the contract and everything. I mean, I think this is probably a pretty good time to buy low on somebody like this. Justin, would you agree? Is this the kind of the time to buy on Odunze after? I mean, he just had a 100-point game, but I think people overall are a little bit disappointed with from the first 9 weeks.
Because he just had a 100-point game. He's got to be wide receiver 1 of the season, right?
That was pretty impressive, man.
Oh man,
I was wrong on this guy. 100 points in a single game.
Oh, could you imagine? No, 100 yards.
I don't know. My instincts tell me the best buy window is going to be a little bit later on in the season, as I think he will have some more struggles, more likely than not, from a combination of different reasons. Just too many mouths to feed. He'll have some other down weeks. If you do believe believe beyond a shadow of doubt that he is going to be the alpha. It's not going to be DJ Moore. You have the possibility. He's a rookie. He's more likely to have an upward trajectory than anybody else on the offense. So it is more likely that if somebody is to really ascend into being the obvious one, it's more likely to be him than more potentially established. Not necessarily more likely that he establishes himself than more, but just more likely that he improves from week to week, and that improves his chance of doing that. So you could miss out on it. I personally would rather hold and try to buy a little bit later on, unless I'm in a full rebuild, in which case I'm happy to make that buy. I just don't think I'm ever going to feel super confident starting him the rest of this year. So I guess I don't have many rebuilding teams. I have 2 or 3 where I'd want to roster him, and it's just hard to take the value that his name has right now and not try to turn that into a wide receiver in the similar range that's actually going to score me more reliable points.
No, I definitely understand. It's probably something you would be doing on a rebuilder for sure. But I think there's at least a chance that he ascends and that this is his low point. But yeah, it could also be, at the end of the season, his value kind of stays around this price point until, this Keenan Allen being gone speculation really comes to fruition.
Yeah, I mean, I guess also I'm just a little bit gun shy because of that Tyler Lockett being gone speculation from last year with JSN.
I think that's a little bit different because Lockett was with the team for a while, and there's quite an age difference between Allen and Lockett. I think it was a year or two, which I mean maybe it's not huge, but just when you're getting a couple years extra out from 30, yeah, it makes me think that probably won't take him back.
Yep, I hear where you're coming from there, and I was very glad personally you took Roma Dunze, because between the two in a vacuum, I think I prefer the next guy here off the board, even though I almost took the guy David took over him, and that guy is Lad McConkey. I mean, he is in total points wide receiver 19 right now in full PPR, and that is with his bye week being included. He's looked good. He hasn't had incredible snap percentages. He's only been over 80% of the snaps twice, but those 2 times are 2 of the last 3 weeks. So because of that, because of the fact that the offense seems to be clicking a little bit better, they look like Justin Herbert's getting unleashed a little bit more. They're getting more confident throwing the ball. And I think that's something that they want to do to open the run, to open the pass, to open the run. Like, I don't think they want to run the ball all the time. I think that they want a balanced offense. And I think that Lad McConkey could end up around wide receiver 12 at the end of the year. Like, I wouldn't be surprised by that if he continues to improve, play more snap. He has the ability to house almost anything. The guy is fast. He's had one kind of like more of like a slant type of route that he took to the house recently. Like, he just looks good on the field. I personally would take a guy who's produced as a rookie over a guy who hasn't been bad in Roma Dunze, but I mean, Lad has been a guy that could be a starter on a championship team. And I just think at the end of the year, Lad is going to be worth, if he continues doing what he's doing, close to 2 firsts in value. Maybe not quite there. And I just don't think the dynasty community will be the same on Rome. Again, maybe you believe in him long term, you want to hold him, etc. But I guess I more view it as a short-term payoff on investment, as well as the points they can score me this year.
A pretty spicy Lad McConkey takes there, Justin. I'm a big fan. If he finishes as a back-end wide receiver 1 rest of the season, that's big for me. I got him on my big money league in redrafts. That'd make me some good money there. I'd be happy about that. Unless I'm getting a plus, I'm definitely taking Roma Dunze. If I'm competing and you offer me Lad and a decent plus, I'd be interested. I think especially once we get to the offseason, I think Roma Dunze's arrow is going to be up. Lad McConkey's neutral, maybe. They're probably going to add someone still. Like, I don't know. I think they're both great picks. They're both great values, but I think I definitely prefer Rome 1-to-1. Anyways, moving on to the guy Justin almost picked at 109, Bo Nix. Look, we play super flex. Quarterbacks are important. He's had some ugly football out there. He's had some ugly plays. He's also shown a lot of growth. It looks like he fits in that offense well. He's doing it both in the air and on the ground. Now, he's not doing a ton through the air, let's be honest, but kind of like Drake May, he has a terrible supporting cast around him. Unlike Drake May, he does have a pretty good offensive line, but skill position group, not much out there. He's QB 8 in total points right now, QB 12 in points per game if we ignore Russ and his 2 starts. I don't see a world where he doesn't start next year at the very least unless he gets injured. I kind of think he's the long-term starter, so dual threat long-term starter with a team that has some ability to add in the offseason. I think Bo Nix is definitely a pretty solid pick here at the end of the first round. Gotta be happy.
Yeah, I think everybody probably underestimated his dual threat ability. I mean, who would have thought that he would have been running for this many yards? Because if he's able to hold down that job, which the last few weeks, I mean, he's played played pretty darn good and they've got a winning record. If you're running like that, that's I don't know if it's quite to the Drake May level, but I mean, just like I said with him, that's the cheat code right there. So he's somebody that you would want on a rebuilder, a contender. So that gives him really, really strong value in the market. So very encouraging stuff from Bo Nix. At 111, I went with JJ McCarthy. Now this is somebody that went, mid to late round one of rookie drafts. And though we are not going to see him this year, I still like his outlook. I wish he didn't suffer this season any injury, of course, but my confidence in Kevin O'Connell and this offense is even higher than it was in the offseason when they took him. I mean, with the Vikings losing some games, I mean, hopefully things are still on track for them to ride with McCarthy in 2025. But I mean, with Darnold playing as well as he has, it definitely throws a wrench in those plans. But I think even if they do bring back Darnold for a year or two, I think that McCarthy, he's going to have good value in the market still. I think for rebuilders, he'll be kind of on that Jordan Love, Mahomes development plan. So I don't think that it would completely tank his value per se, but you obviously would rather him be starting. But yeah, I really, really like the outlook for this offense overall.
Can't argue with that one from a rebuilder standpoint. It's a hard pill to roster on a contender. We were hoping to maybe see something from him, but just the value at the 111, especially because publicly the Vikings are still saying it's JJ's team next year. People are speculating it's going to basically take a Super Bowl run for Darnold to stay there, which for my Darnold shares wouldn't mind it. For my JJ shares, I'd probably mind it, but I digress. I think it's a very solid pick there. Would have been my guy, but instead I'm taking Jonathan Brooks, who should be active this coming weekend. I think that a lot of our hope for him as a potential back end of the season league winner type of guy could still happen with when he is starting to make it into the lineup. How bad that team has been, how little sense it makes for them to start giving him, coming off an injury, a big workload. I don't expect him to be quite what we thought he could have been for a playoff run. In fact, I'd be shocked if I feel comfortable starting him in the playoffs where I do have him, to be honest. But I do think next year he has the easy ability to be that, because Hubbard has been able to be great there. And I think we all agree Hubbard is just a guy, though a serviceable guy. I would take him over a lot of backup RBs. So I think just because this was the obvious RB1 in the class, a guy we all believe in, should be healthy next year, good to go. I think he's the easy investment here at this point. You guys agree?
Yeah, I think this is definitely right around where he should go in a redraft. We haven't really seen anything to take us off our draft assessment. A little worried that he's not back yet, but at the same time, why would they rush him? They're not competing for anything, so I'm not worried about that.
If you guys see that he's on a contending team, do you want to buy if you're a rebuilder? Because I mean,
oh
yeah, I think so too. Because he was 20 years old when he was drafted. He's 21 now. I still like the outlook for at least him as a prospect. The offense is a little shaky, but what's the most you're willing to pay for him on a rebuilder?
I mean, if I have any of the old guys on a rebuilder, any old wide receiver, running back, tight end that I think I can add a little bit to them to get to him, I'm willing to throw a package that's worth around a first. Let's kind of ignore that question, and I think we're going to probably answer it with the next game I want to play. I think we're going to come back to that price point. I want to play a little game here. We're going to do our recap here. I'm going to reread all of the names off of the list that we have drafted in order. I want you guys to stop me when you wouldn't pay an early 25 first for that player. At the 101, we have Jaden Daniels. At the 102, Malik Neighbors. The 103, Caleb Williams. The 104, Marvin Harrison. The 105, Brock Bowers.
I think that's my line for early.
Not willing to pay an early?
But I would for Bowers, and I'd consider it for Thomas. It's just more situational for Thomas, so the hard line would be Bowers, though.
All right. JP, any chance you're paying a early first for our 106, Brian Thomas Jr.?
Yeah,
I think there's a chance for him in May. It's just, like I said, it's a lot more team dependent and league dependent.
All right. So Brian Thomas Jr. and May are maybes. And when we get to Romo Dunze, there is a no way at this point.
Yeah, I don't think so. But I mean, I think May and BTJ, if they were to be inserted in this next year's class, I mean, they're probably the 102, 103 in my opinion. So I definitely would for those top 7 guys. But yeah, Adunze, no, just because based on what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page there. And then let's ask a mid first. Are we paying that for Romo Dunze?
Yep.
Yes.
For Lad McConkey?
Maybe, but I think I'd prefer to keep him the first if I'm being honest.
Bo Nix.
Situational, I think that's around the fair value for those two. though.
Yeah, I
And
think
then
both of those two is a maybe.
and then switching it to a late first, you're willing to pay that for Lad?
A
Yeah,
late,
definitely.
yeah, I'd pay late for sure.
For Bo Nix if you need quarterback?
Yeah,
Yeah.
For JJ McCarthy, now it gets a little interesting.
very situational just because of the injury. But if I had a first on a rebuild, then next year's quarterback class isn't great. So if I'm trying to get ahead of them, maybe not a bad buy.
And now, kind of to get to JP's question in a very roundabout way here, a late first for Jonathan Brooks. I had a point to this. See,
Oh, man. I think based on how good this upcoming running back class is, and Jonathan Brooks not being in an offense that I really love, probably not paying a late first right now.
It would definitely depend. If I think they've got a good shot at a buy, I'd definitely be able to consider it. But like JP said, next year's running back class looks really good, and it so far seems to be living up to the hype. So I might want to keep the flexibility for now and see how he looks for a couple of weeks before I commit.
If he was on 25 different offenses, yeah, I probably would, honestly. The big part of it is
I
just the
mean,
Panthers.
Hubbard's producing on it, and he's not that good.
Yeah.
yeah, I do think there's something David brought up the other day, which was just basically if we're confident that he is that guy based off of his Texas tape numbers, etc., there's really no reason we shouldn't be confident he will continue to be that guy. It's just hard to make that without having seen anything. So definitely understand. I think I agree with David. It's just dependent. But if it's they have a buy locked up already, I'm willing to consider it because I do think he's probably going to be better because of the limited quarterback upside. There's no Brock Bowers tight end next year. The wide receiver class that we've been going through, it's not as exciting as we were hoping it would be. So I do think I would take a 70% chance that he is better than the 110, 111, 112 next year at this point, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I definitely understand. I like him as a prospect for sure. And speaking of the 2025 class, that's actually going to be our next video. So you guys tune in next week. We will have that up for you guys.
Gonna be a fun one. All right. Any other main points for round one, guys? Or are we gonna move on to round two?
Just, this was a very hyped up class, and I think so far, at least at the top end, it's living up to expectations, if not exceeding them. If you had 24 picks, like you said earlier in the video, you're very happy about it.
Yeah, and the guys that are top 12 right here pictured, it's the same exact top 12 I had. I mean, I was just a little bit lower on worthy item at 201, but the guys that we took in the first round were in the first round pretty much.
Not that common. Honestly, a lot of time, at least some of the back end guys have dropped out, and usually dropped out by more. Like I had some of our next guys around this range, and they're still all kind of around this range at this point. So it's very interesting to see. So round two, we're not going to go through everybody. We're going to read the whole list off for you here, and we're going to kind of just go over some main points. We're already approaching near 30 minutes, and don't want to have this last forever. Want to be able to go through some other stuff for you at the end. So going to go through some main points. I'm going to read off our 202 through actually our 201. Should I start with the 201, guys?
That's a good spot. Yeah, start at the very beginning.
Actually, we're going to start in the middle, weave to the beginning, go to the end, and kind of in a roundabout way tell a nice story. So no, we have at the 201 Keon Coleman, 202 Xavier Worthy, 203 Bucky Irving, 204 Tyrone Tracy, 205 Ricky Pearsall, 206 Xavier Leggett, 207 Michael Penix, 208 Trey Benson, 209 Braylon Allen, 210 Ben Sinnott. Again, we play 1.75 tight end premium. 211 Ray Davis. 212 Blake Corum. JP, you made that Ray Davis pick even before that big touchdown yesterday as well. He makes that pick look even better today. So gonna start kind of talking at the front six here. Coleman through Leggett. I am curious for you guys, just starting conversation. Do you view this as somewhat of a tier here? Do you view there to be a top tier here in general? Because there's definitely a drop off from the first round to this. What would you consider to be like the tier at the top of this, guys, that you'd be willing to go between with a third? Either way,
it's hard because Tracy stands out because he's the most helpful for a competitor. If I'm competing, I'm not sure I would trade him for any of those guys in a third. On a rebuild, though, especially going from receiver to receiver, I do think there's a difference between Coleman and Worthy in value and Pearsall and Leggett. So I think maybe the top four, as I'm looking at it, are about that first tier for me in this round.
And I understand you thinking that about Coleman because he has been pretty good this year. I was a little bit lower on him, and I just think with Amari Cooper, he's still kind of ramping up with the team. So I do think once he's fully ready, that it is going to hurt Coleman. So I mean, I personally see them all pretty similar, but yeah, I think from a market perspective, Coleman and Worthy definitely have the highest value between the 4 guys, but I'm pretty happy with the 4 of them in the same tier.
I definitely think we probably have a little bit of take lock on Coleman. Obviously, like he is not meant to be that big alpha X because he doesn't quite have that ability to separate that we saw. And I think having Amari Cooper there helps him because he can play more the flanker, potentially the power slot role, which is what we ideally wanted for him. Obviously, we see a lot of Shakir coming out of the slot still, so might be taking that flanker role more often. But I think it's actually a plus for him, to be honest, having a alpha guy there. I don't necessarily know that it's a big downside. Allows him to actually develop while having some success for your fantasy team, which honestly, like we need to see that development with success because we're so impatient. Otherwise, he'd drop off the face of the world if he was developing behind the scenes. I think I have a little bit of take lock on Worthy, to be honest with you, watching them play quite a bit because the Chiefs are always on in prime time. So I get to see a lot of them. Normally I'm watching Red Zone, so I don't get to see every play. And he really has some problems getting his feet down the sideline, easy to push him out of bounds, easy to separate him. I know JP, you had a lot of those concerns about him with contested catches. He needs to
Apparently, he
figure out a way
struggles to keep his
tonight a
feet
couple times. Oh
inbounds.
my God. Come on, dude. Come on. But anyways,
Yeah, I do think those concerns have popped up, but he has had pretty encouraging usage at least. His target share has gone up from 20% before the bye to 27, and red zone target share was a top 15 number in the league, which I thought was kind of shocking. So they are making a point to get him involved. So if he can develop, I really don't think he's ever going to be a true wide receiver 1 in the NFL. Not for fantasy either, but I think that he could be a guy where he's a wide receiver 3 or 4 type, that gives you these boom weeks if he does continue to develop.
I have him on both my best ball dynasty teams, so happy about that at the very least.
That's a good place to have him for sure. And Coleman, honestly.
Yeah, I think Coleman. I mean, I just think they have 4 or 5 targets with Cooper. I mean, they got Cooper, Coleman, Shakir. When he's on the field, he gets targeted a lot. Kincaid, he gets looks, and even James Cook out of the backfield. So I guess that's why I'm a little bit lower on Coleman, combined with maybe my pre-draft takes of him as well. But he has looked pretty good, and he is probably the best ball winner they have. I mean, a Cooper is good at that as well, but I think Josh Allen is willing to throw those contested catches, and Coleman, he's pretty good at that.
Can't argue with that. With the exception of a pretty mediocre night tonight for our boy Bucky Irving, guy David was very big on pre-draft. He has looked like the best bat in Tampa Bay. Finishes of RB 22, 23, 12, 16, and 18 for 5 top 24 finishes so far on the year. It's been pretty exciting, pretty exceptional what he's been able to do with a bit of competition there. We were hoping that he would start winning a little bit more, but he does have a nagging toe injury going on. I am curious because I ended up taking Irving over Tracy. I think, David, you would have taken Tracy. Do you mind giving me your pitch for Tracy over Irving just in general?
Basically, it comes down to what I think he can do for me the rest of this year. I don't mind flexing Irving, but I think Tracy, if you look at the last month, he's basically a 20 touch a game kind of guy. Per Dwayne McFarland on X, over the last 3 games with Singletary in the lineup, he's had 12.3 points per game, 65% of snaps, 57% of attempts, 51% of routes, and an 8% target share. So I think he's just someone you're comfortable plugging in, at RB2. If you were a hero RB team, he's plugging in that missing link, hopefully shooting some teams to some championships. I'm not sure Bucky has that league winning type of upside.
Probably not without an injury in front of him.
Yeah, no, I do agree, and I think Bucky Irvin, he's looked really, really good. If he was a lead back, I think he'd probably be doing better than Tracy, honestly, because
Yeah, if White was on New York, that would be a completely different story. But we don't love Rashad White, but he's going to take work.
We play in this specific dimension, though, not in that alternate universe. So,
yeah, I mean, Tyron Tracy, I think he's, as a contender, I would prefer him for sure. I mean, running backs on a rebuild or whatever, but Irvin, I think he's 2 or 3 years younger as well. I know Tyron Tracy's 24 years old. The offense isn't great, so maybe he won't be a league winner, but his usage is very encouraging. I think it's a little bit of a toss-up where I probably do lean Tracy at this point just based on his usage and what we're getting from him this year.
All right, next little point I want to talk about. I just want to go down these first 6 guys. I just want to talk about, would you be willing to pay an early 25-second for them, assuming you have the flexibility to do so? Keon Coleman, either of you guys willing to pay that for him?
Honestly, I think the only guy here would be Tracy if I'm competing, and even then it's a question. The next year's class is a little deeper. At least we hope it is.
What's in the box?
Could be another boat, It could be a smaller boat, unfortunately, but I'll take the hopium and the flexibility of the early second, I think.
Yeah, I would take the early second over all these guys just because, I mean, it's a liquid asset. And yeah, I mean, it could be a player that's better than what I'm really viewing these guys as currently.
Okay, talking about these guys, I'm going to go down the same list, same question, but replacing it with mid-second and a third. Are you willing to pay that for Coleman potentially? potentially.
I think I see that as the same as an early second, honestly.
I don't.
Well, fine.
I say pretty close.
It's harder to have the flexibility to give that up in season as a contender, I guess is where I'm at. That's two pieces that you could plug holes with.
All right, all right. So let's just ask, would you be willing to pay a mid-second for Coleman?
Yeah.
Worthy?
Yeah.
Irving?
Yeah.
Stop me if you disagree as well, JP. Tracy?
Yeah.
Pearsall?
Probably not.
I think these next three are the maybes.
Leggett? Maybe. Penix?
That's a conditional, definitely depends on where I'm at, but also a maybe.
And then when we get to these guys, I don't think I'm willing to pay that for any of them. JP, are you willing to pay a mid-second for anyone from Benson to Corum?
No.
All right, so let's move on to talking about Michael Penix. I'm going to ask JP as our resident Falcons fan, give me the bull case on him in Dynasty.
I mean, really, the only thing that you can hope for is that Kirk Cousins is only starting for this year and next, which would mean that after this season, you're only waiting one more year. I mean, they would have to eat some money. We've seen some teams do it. But if Kirk Cousins, if he's not as good next year, then Michael Penix, he steps in. And it's just really hard to see, honestly. It's hard for me to give a really good bull case because I think Cousins has been playing good. But yeah, you're not looking until 2026 at the very, very earliest. And I don't even see that, but it's probably 2027 is when you're looking for him to be a starter, which a starting quarterback that has upside, a late second maybe, but a mid second, I don't think I would wait that long.
It's a tough one for me to even want on a rebuilder because unless it's a, oh my God, what did I do? I dug everything out. I took over an orphan and there's literally not even any studs left. Like there's nothing left. I'm 3 years out. Like I don't usually like to rebuild in a situation where my window is that far away. I'm always usually, whenever I rebuild, I'm usually trying to compete the next year and he's not part of a rebuilding process for next year. Not to say you don't want to hold on to assets that could be useful in 2 years, but usually I like those and they're called, hear me out here, 26 draft picks.
Yeah.
Which are a lot more liquid than a Michael Penix, who, again, if you don't necessarily want him, I don't necessarily want him unless the price is right. It's not that, but necessarily liquid of a thing. So I get having him there, but and I don't really know that I would have taken anyone ahead of him. I just don't think we're really excited about anybody in this range beyond when they actually are starting, which is hard to predict for these guys.
I guess for Penix, the bull case I would say is, well, obviously you have to be a rebuilder to be interested. Good thing about him on a rebuild is he's not going to affect your max points for. He's just eating up a roster spot. Another thing about that is draft picks are safer. He's a pretty safe asset. Either he continues to be a top 10 pick as a backup and he gets closer and closer to his starting date, or Cousins gets hurt and he spikes in value because he's now playing. I just don't losing value from this valuation probably until he plays. I just think it's pretty steady to have him here. I'm not going to overpay for him, but I'm happy to hold him.
I just think that you could pay a late second for him right now, maybe mid second to get him. I don't know exactly what you need. It'd probably be at least a mid second to be able to prime from somebody. I'd rather just do it a year from now because I think you can probably still get him for that same price point.
To be honest with you, I think most of the exposure I want to get to him is next summer after the rookie draft has occurred and there's just hype for all the rookies and it's obvious he's not starting and just getting him in startups, to be honest with you, but when you can get him in round 16, 17, potentially next year, which is where we saw Jordan Love going, after his rookie year when he was still buried on the bench. Like, I think that's the way I want to accrue, or if I can get him for a third later on or a player worth a third. I think I kind of agree that it's just, he probably will have his day in the sun, but I'm so impatient.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I don't know if you'll ever be able to get him for 1/3, but probably 2/3 maybe. If people are just like, are tired of this guy, maybe it's rookie season. So like, oh, I want to get picks and they don't have picks. Maybe I could get him for 2/3 maybe then.
Yeah, I think that is plausible for sure. Gonna touch on Ben Sinnott here briefly, then I think we'll kind of wrap up talking about all these running backs kind of in a basket together. I think the bull case for Sinnott, pretty easy. He's a tight end with a good quarterback, a old tight end before him who's probably helping him learn the rope, won't be there for very long. I think it's pretty easy to see a path to success for him. Are either of you guys willing to pay a mid-second for Sinnott if you have the flexibility and don't have your long-term solution at tight end?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I probably want something back, or maybe wait until the offseason at the very least. I do think that's reasonable to ask if you have Sinnott. I don't know if I would sell for a late second either.
All right. I can't say that I probably would either, but I could see considering it if the team was right with this 1.75 tight end premium that we're talking about here. And then just going through these running backs here. First of all, David, can you just give a brief kind of ELI5 explanation of why we're really hammering running backs once we get past the wide receivers that we think have the potential to be difference makers that we've already taken?
Most of us know that play, and if you don't, then something you definitely want to learn quickly. Backup running backs are the best bench players to have. If their starter gets hurt, it's generally pretty obvious who's going to take that work over. Not so much true at wide receiver. You know, any of these guys here, and honestly, probably another half dozen or so that would be the third round, are worth having and could easily spike in value and put up some RB2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, there's only one guy that we've seen be able to really step up and be that true workhorse, and that's Ray Davis. It was week 6 when James Cook went out. Before that, Ray Davis wasn't super involved or effective, but he played against the Jets. He filled in, had 23 touches for 152 yards, not a touchdown. But since then, he hasn't got many touches. I still think he's looked really, really good. So it's not always a 100% guarantee that they're going to take over as like that kind of workhorse role. But yeah, I feel pretty good about Ray Davis, and it's a good offense as well. Are you guys taking him over Corn for sure because we've seen him be able to do that?
In a format like this, probably. If I had Corum and someone offered me Ray Davis, I don't know that I would swap just to swap.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Sean McVay uses one running back primarily too, so I think that's a really good case for Corum to probably step in and take over that role. But it is a little bit concerning that Ronnie Rivers was getting more touches than Corum to start the year. But maybe they're just really taking their time with Corum, even though he's an older prospect. I don't know if it's a little weird.
Yeah, it's an interesting case for sure. I think that honestly, all of these guys, 208, 209, so we have Trey Benson, Braylon Allen, Ray Davis, Blake Corum. Honestly, just take your guy at this point. I can tell you the best one of these players is the one who is starting that week. For that reason, I think it's easy to say Trey Benson should be the first one because James Conner is so old and he's going to be gone. The path to starting for Davis, Allen, and Corum seems to be entirely injury dependent for the next 2 years, this season and the following season, just based on the contracts of the guys in front of them. I think all of these guys, from what they've flashed so far, with the exception of Corum, Benson has flashed somewhat on a very limited touch. You've seen some 18, 20-yard carries where he looks good, but obviously he's not getting any work, or he's not getting the real work until superstar James Conner is gone in front of him. Do you guys agree that these four guys are a little bit in a class of their own compared to the maybe honorable mention RBs we might mention later? Or do you kind of view them as all the same, David?
I think there's 3 or 4 names we could put in there, and I was about to bring that up. We'll go into these names a little bit more here in a second, but Jalen Wright, Kamani Vidal, Isaac Garando, Marshawn Lloyd, even Audric Estime. I don't know that I'd pay to move between these guys. Maybe Trey Benson just because of the draft capital, I guess. But you know, like you said, the best one is the one that's starting out of that group.
That's the truth.
I think Trey Benson, I would definitively take him over those guys. Just because next year he could be the starter. I don't think that's really possible for any of Braylon Allen, Ray Davis, Blake Corum outside of a major injury. Because Trey Benson, he had much better draft capital. We haven't seen much from him, but James Conner, he could be gone after this year. And I don't think any of these guys outside of Benson you're getting a second for unless the starter goes down. And I think you still could for Benson.
I think that's a very good point.
JP with the big brain energy there. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. All right. And moving on from our rookie redraft, we're just going to do some honorable mention players that we're all going to give one shout out for. I'm going to start with JP here. Give your honorable mention guy that did not get drafted here today.
Jalen Wright's going to be the first guy here. And like we said, he kind of can be grouped into that group of running backs we just talked about. He's got a pretty good offense. I mean, the situation there, if Devon Achane goes down, I think he could fill in because I think he has looked good in his limited touches. And Raheem Mostert, he's really, really old. He does not look nearly the same. So it's really hard to see them bringing him back next year. So I think there's a case that Jalen Wright's going to be the clear-cut RB2 after this year. Maybe he even is now. And yeah, I mean, that offense, sure, it hasn't been great when Tua was out, but when Tua was in there, there's still been a good offense. So I still do like Jalen Wright. He's definitely somebody that you want to maybe buy low if you can get him for a mid-third. I would do that all day long.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It probably belongs in that tier of guys we were talking about for sure. Maybe not so much the rest of the backs I named, but I think Wright for sure.
They traded also a future third-round pick for him too, so they're fairly invested. So it's almost like day 2 capital they invested, even though they took him in the beginning of the 4th round.
That's fair.
Checks out, I guess. All right, my guy, I'm taking my honorable mention shout out, tight end JT Sanders. Caveat, would not be taking him as my like 301 to 303 guy if we were not playing tight end premium, but we are talking tight end premium here. So, given the fact that he has flashed enough for me to feel confident that he can be, if they put together competent quarterback play, a solid tight end, the fact that we had him as our tight end 2 or 3 pre NFL combine NFL draft, and pretty much consensus tight end 3 post NFL draft, and he's done something as a rookie, so there's going to be some hype about him, so he's going to be somewhat flexible because these post hype sleeper tight ends going into their sophomore season are usually still worth a third. I think he's a guy worth having on your roster because I think you're going to be able to move him in the offseason as there's hype that, hey, Bryce Young just, let him do a win over the Saints that got Dennis Allen fired. What if he puts together a couple good games? What if they figure out some sort of QB solution some other way? There's going to be some sort of hype train where if you don't believe in him, I think you can move and capitalize him. And if you do believe on him, well, listen to the hype train. How could it be wrong? Hype trains are never wrong. So I kind of like him as a little bit of a sleeper here if you do have a tight end premium, especially.
Yeah, he's definitely shown some flashes. Hard to disagree with you there, especially if there's a tight end premium. I'm going to go with another guy who definitely has some upside. I'm not sure, to be honest, I'm not sure how much I would pay for him, but I'm going to go with Troy Franklin. He's starting to get used a little bit more and more in the Broncos offense. He's got a young quarterback that he's growing with and has been since back in college, which, hasn't helped them get off to the hot start we were hoping for, but I still think it's good for them long term. They've had a couple of just misses on longer touchdowns that if he hit those, he might actually be making an impact this year in your lineups. I think his path to gaining targets is a lot easier than the rest of these rookies we're talking about or could be talking about, except I guess maybe Jalen Polk, but he's kind of been a disappointment. We've heard some rumors that Sutton might get traded. I kind of think that's not going to happen. They've definitely lost steam as of late, but he could easily be gone in the offseason. Franklin's got still kind of a long shot that he hits it.
So let's just do a quick little mid-third or Jalen Wright, JP.
I'll take Jalen Wright.
Mid-third or Troy Franklin, David.
If I have the ability to spend it, but if I need that third and I'm competing, I need it for something to plug a hole. I'm keeping the third.
So if you have 2 or 3 thirds, you're considering it.
Or if I'm rebuilding. All right, Justin. Same question for you with your guy. You taking that mid-third or JT Sanders?
Basically, if I have Kelsey and nothing else at tight end, I'm probably willing to pay the mid-third for JT Sanders if I can't find a different inheritance plan, because I kind of like to have that inheritance plan. But if I'm set at tight end, I probably would rather stay flexible. Anybody else you guys really just dying to mention? JP, you want to talk about is there like a wide receiver that I can shoot you down on or anything? I haven't really roasted you very much this episode. If you mention a guy, we can really go at it real quick. Let's do it. Do you want to do it?
You talking about the high.
You know who I'm talking about.
Jalen Coker, yeah, the Cokeheads. I think he's somebody you at least want to have an eye on. He's flashed in reception perception. He charted an in season, and the results were pretty darn good. He's got good size. Came from a small school, but he's not getting on the field that much. But when he's done some interesting things. So he's a person that just a lot of people have not heard of. So I just at least wanted to mention him. But yeah, there's some crazy stats you'll see. David pointed it out where it's like, oh, the only guys to be day 3 or after and have an 80 plus PFF receiving grade has been like Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Puka Nacua, and Jalen Coker. I think the minimum was 15 targets, which he's not those guys. He is not, but it's at least some signal that maybe that this is a guy to keep an eye on. He might be the wide receiver 2 or 3 the rest of the year that can develop. I think there's some signs that maybe he could be better than Leggett, but I'm still going to lean on Leggett being better at this point.
Yeah, I forget who posted that list on X, but when you kind of zoom out a little bit and look at the numbers, like you said, Coker's done some things, but those other guys, Puka, Tyreek, Diggs, they had a lot bigger of a sample size. Tyreek's wasn't tremendously bigger, but especially Puka and Diggs.
They were drafted too.
He's certainly not quite on that level, but I get the tweet. It was a good tweet. It got interaction, so it's a good list to be on. Can't deny that.
Yeah, there was all kinds of hype for Jalen Coker this past weekend. Then he put up 2 catches for 30 yards. It's like, shoot. Well,
and I just want to push back kind of the same argument that I usually make is the majority of the time when a team is in a bad situation like this and you're like, well, this guy could develop over the next year or 2 into a very solid NFL receiver over a large period of time. The answer for who's going to be the most valuable wide receiver on the team is very often not on the team. So
Sure.
just a lot of the times with the guys, like we had like Jordan Whittington in the offseason, I said the same thing. Like, yeah, like, oh, like what about when Cooper Cup's gone and he could step from the 3 to the 2? Although, like, usually the guy who's going to take the place is not currently on the roster. From a dynasty standpoint, I'd say his value is probably very closely tied to if he is actually producing as the second half of the season goes on. We're not usually looking at these guys unless they really truly start to flash as a long-term solution. So if you like him and you want to have him for like around the price of a third, I've wasted thirds on a lot less. So I can't blame you, but just I just want to be the voice of tempering long-term expectations and just if he's producing, great. If you're playing best ball, great. But
Justin, I don't
yeah.
think cokeheads have long-term expectations.
Are you taking Jalen Coker or Javon Baker right now?
Man,
Pass.
you're right. Uh, I, I don't know. I would probably take Baker just because I like him, and I don't think either are going to matter. But I think probably process would say Coker just because he's actually done something.
And I would take Coker over Luke McCaffrey and Roman Wilson. Those guys were at least
Get Luke McCaffrey's name out your mouth.
I knew it was coming. But just real quick on Jalen Coker, he had an 81.1% success rate versus zone reception, which he was playing a power slot role at 6'3", 210. So I was like, okay, he's at least interesting. He was just barely under 70% success rate versus man, which was it's a small sample. It's only 2 weeks, but I was like, I did not expect that for this guy.
All right. So if you want to be a cokehead with JP Bennett, feel free to. I'm personally pretty out. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Dino Construction Podcast. We hope you found this as helpful for you as it was for us. Please remember to like and subscribe wherever you listen or view. And from all of us here at the Dino Construction Podcast, until next time.